The CVS pharmacy on Central Avenue was bustling with its usual evening crowd, as Margaret Maggie Sullivan carefully checked her prescription bag one more time, making sure she had everything her oncologist had prescribed. At 52 years old, Maggie was in the fight of her life against stage 3 breast cancer. And the medications in that bag represented her lifeline. Expensive drugs that gave her hope for tomorrow, and the strength to face another day of chemotherapy. Maggie had been battling cancer for 8 months now, enduring surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, and all the devastating side effects that came with aggressive treatment. Her once thick auburn hair had fallen out months ago, and she now wore a simple knit cap to cover her bald head. She had lost 40 pounds, and her clothes hung loose on her diminished frame. But her spirit remained unbroken. Her husband of 28 years, Frank Sullivan, had wanted to come with her to pick up the medications, but Maggie had insisted she could manage the short trip alone. Frank worked as a long-haul trucker and had already used up most of his vacation days for her medical appointments. They needed every dollar they could earn to pay for treatments that insurance only partially covered. What Maggie didn't know was that she was being watched by predators who specialized in targeting vulnerable people, particularly those leaving pharmacies with expensive medications. And what those predators didn't know was that Frank Sullivan was not just any truck driver. He was a 20-year member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club, and his wife was about to become the focus of a brotherhood that would move heaven and earth to protect one of their own. Lurking in the parking lot were 3 young men in their early 20s who had been casing the pharmacy for several hours, looking for easy targets. They had developed a system for identifying people carrying valuable medications, watching for elderly patients, cancer patients, or anyone who appeared vulnerable or distracted. The leader of the group was Tyler Manning, a 22-year-old with a lengthy juvenile record who had graduated to adult crime as soon as he turned 18. Tyler specialized in targeting people with prescription drugs, which he either used himself or sold on the street for significant profit. With Tyler were his partners in crime: Marcus Webb, a skinny addict who would steal anything to support his drug habit, and Kevin Foster, a high school dropout who filmed their scores for social media and helped identify potential targets. They had been watching Maggie since she entered the pharmacy 30 minutes earlier, noting her obvious illness, her slow movements, and the way she clutched her purse protectively. To them, she represented an easy target, a sick woman who probably wouldn't fight back, and whose medications would be worth hundreds of dollars on the black market. "Look at this one," Tyler whispered to his companions as Maggie exited the pharmacy. "Cancer patient for sure. Probably got some good stuff in that bag." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Pain meds, anti-nausea drugs, maybe some benzos. That stuff's worth a fortune on the street." Kevin pulled out his phone. "Should I film this? Might go viral. Sick lady gets robbed outside pharmacy." "Do it," Tyler said, "but stay back until we're done. Don't want your face in the video." Maggie walked slowly toward her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Frank kept running through his mechanical skills and determination. The evening air was cool, and she pulled her cardigan tighter around her thin frame as she fumbled in her purse for her car keys. The medications in her bag represented more than just pills. They were her hope for survival, her chance to see her grandchildren grow up, her opportunity to celebrate another anniversary with Frank. The total cost of the prescription had been $847, even with insurance, representing nearly a week's worth of Frank's earnings. Tyler approached first, his movements casual and non-threatening until he was close enough to act. "Excuse me, lady," he said in a fake polite voice. "Could you spare some change? Trying to get something to eat?" Maggie looked up at him with the kind eyes of someone who had spent her life helping others. Despite her own struggles, her first instinct was still to help someone she perceived as hungry. "I don't have much cash on me," she said gently. "But there's a Subway right there if you're really hungry. I could buy you a sandwich." Tyler laughed, a harsh sound that immediately changed the dynamic of the encounter. "I don't want a sandwich, lady. I want what's in that bag." Before Maggie could react, Marcus grabbed the pharmacy bag from her hands, while Kevin positioned himself to block her path to the car. "Please," Maggie said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "Those are my medications. I need them. I'm sick." "Yeah, we can see that," Tyler said cruelly, looking at her bald head and frail appearance. "But you know what? Being sick doesn't make you special. It just makes you an easy target." Marcus was already going through the prescription bag, reading the labels on the various medications. "Jackpot," he announced. "Oxycodone, Ativan, Zafran. This stuff is worth serious money." Maggie tried to reach for her medications, but Tyler pushed her away, causing her to stumble and nearly fall. "Please," she begged, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I just finished chemotherapy yesterday. I need those medications to function. Without them, I'll be too sick to continue treatment." Kevin, still recording with his phone, laughed at her distress. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you got cancer," he said mockingly. Natural selection at work. The cruelty of the comment was breathtaking. Here was a woman fighting for her life, and these young men were treating her suffering as entertainment. "My husband," Maggie said desperately. "He works so hard to pay for these medications. Please, I'll give you money instead. I have a credit card." "We don't want your maxed-out credit card," Tyler said. "We want these pills. They're worth more than whatever pathetic amount you have in your account." What they didn't know was that while they were focused on humiliating Maggie, her phone had accidentally dialed Frank during the struggle. The call went to voicemail, but the entire encounter was being recorded, including their voices, their threats, and their cruel comments about her condition. Frank was at a truck stop about 20 miles outside Phoenix when he checked his voicemail during his mandatory rest period. What he heard made his blood run colder than any winter night he had ever driven through. Frank Sullivan was not just any trucker. He was Diesel Sullivan, a founding member of the Phoenix chapter of the Hells Angels. A man who had earned his colors through 20 years of loyalty, brotherhood, and an unbreakable code that put family above everything else. When Frank heard his wife's voice pleading for her cancer medications, when he heard the laughter of young men mocking her illness, when he heard them talking about selling drugs that could mean the difference between life and death for the woman he cared, loved more than his own life, something inside him snapped. Frank immediately called his chapter president. "Savage," came the gruff voice on the other end. "Brother," Frank said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Someone's robbing Maggie. Stole her cancer meds outside the CVS on Central. I'm 20 miles out." There was a moment of silence. Then Savage says voice came back harder than steel. "Not anymore, they didn't. Every brother who can ride rides now. Nobody touches Diesel's old lady. Nobody." The call went out across the entire Phoenix metropolitan area and beyond. Within minutes, Harleys were starting up in garages, driveways, and parking lots throughout the city. Members from neighboring chapters received the alert and began converging on Phoenix. This wasn't just about robbery. This was about someone attacking the family of a founding member, someone messing with a cancer patient, someone crossing every line that mattered to the brotherhood. Back at the pharmacy, Tyler, Marcus, and Kevin were taking their time humiliating Maggie, enjoying the power they felt over someone they saw as helpless. "You know what?" Tyler said, pulling out one of the pill bottles. "Maybe we should make you beg for these. Get down on your knees and beg like the sick old lady you are." Maggie, pushed beyond her breaking point, straightened her spine with whatever strength she had left. "I am not a sick old lady," she said with quiet dignity. "I am a fighter. I am a survivor. And I am the wife of a man who loves me more than you could ever understand." Marcus laughed and shook the pill bottle like a rattle. "Yeah? Where's this husband of yours?" "Probably at home getting drunk while his wife dies slowly." The words hit Maggie like physical blows, but she refused to back down. "He worked 16 hours a day to pay for my treatment. she said firmly. He sleeps in hospital chairs during my chemo sessions. He holds my hand when I'm too sick to speak. He is more of a man than any of you will ever be. Kevin moved closer with his phone, capturing her emotional breakdown for his social media followers. This is great content, he said. Sick lady having a mental breakdown. This is gonna get so many views. That was when they heard it. A sound that started as a distant rumble but quickly grew into something that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. The unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines. Not just a few, but dozens of them, all heading in their direction. Through the parking lot, they could see lights approaching from every direction, headlights and taillights creating streams of light. Through the evening darkness, all converging on the CVS pharmacy. What the hell is that? Marcus asked nervously, still clutching Maggie's medications. The sound grew louder and louder until it was deafening. Then the first motorcycle appeared, followed by another and another, until the entire parking lot was filled with Harleys and their leather-clad riders. These weren't weekend warriors or casual riders. These were members of the most notorious motorcycle club in America. Men who had earned their colors through loyalty, courage, and a code that put brotherhood above law, above comfort, above their own safety. Savage led the first wave, his massive frame immediately recognizable even with his helmet on. Behind him came Road Dogg, Iron Horse, Bear, Thunder, and dozens of others, their engines creating a symphony of mechanical fury that announced their arrival to anyone within miles. Tyler, Marcus, and Kevin watched in growing terror as more and more motorcycles arrived. Bikers from the Phoenix chapter, the Tucson chapter, the Flagstaff chapter. Word had spread through the entire network, and everyone who could ride had come. Oh shit, Tyler whispered, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. The bikers dismounted in perfect synchronization, their movements practiced and purposeful. They had done this before, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Maggie, seeing the familiar patches and recognizing several faces despite their helmets, felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Frank sent you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Savage removed his helmet and approached Maggie first, his imposing presence somehow gentle when focused on her. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said respectfully, "are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Maggie shook her head, though she was clearly shaken. "They took my medications," she said. "All of them. I need them for my cancer treatment." Savage's expression hardened as he turned his attention to the three young men who were now completely surrounded by over 30 members of the Hells Angels. "Which one of you pieces of garbage thought it would be smart to steal cancer medication from this lady?" Savage asked, his voice carrying across the parking lot. Tyler tried to brazen it out, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "We don't know what you're talking about, old man. We were just asking for directions." Bear stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the entire group. "Son," Bear said slowly, "we heard the whole thing. We know exactly what you did. The question now is whether you're going to hand over those medications willingly, or whether we're going to have a different kind of conversation." Marcus, holding the bag of stolen medications, looked around at the sea of leather and denim surrounding him. Every direction he looked, he saw men who looked like they had stepped out of his worst nightmares. "Look," Marcus said, his voice shaking, "it was just business. Nothing personal. Nothing personal." Iron Horse limped forward, his recent injuries making his approach even more intimidating. "You stole medication from a cancer patient and called it business?" Road Dogg approached Kevin, who was still holding his phone. "Son," Road Dogg said, extending his hand, "you'll take that phone. And you better hope you didn't post any of that footage online." Kevin handed over his phone without resistance, watching as Road Dogg deleted the video and all backup copies. Thunder, whose voice lived up to his nickname, stepped closer to Tyler. "Boy," Thunder said, "do you have any idea who you're messing with? Do you know who this woman's husband is?" Tyler shook his head, fear making him unable to speak. "Frank Sullivan," Thunder continued. "Diesel Sullivan, founding member of this chapter, 20 years in the club. And that woman you're terrorizing, she's been fighting cancer for 8 months while her husband works himself to death to pay for her treatment." The three young men looked around desperately, but they were completely trapped. More motorcycles continued to arrive, until there were over 40 bikers surrounding them in the pharmacy parking lot. Diesel, the club sergeant-at-arms and no relation to Frank despite the similar name, approached Marcus and held out his hand. "The medications. Now." Marcus, his hands shaking, handed over the bag of stolen prescriptions. Diesel checked the contents carefully before walking over to Maggie and returning her medications. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said gently, "everything appears to be here. Are you sure you're not injured?" Maggie accepted her medications gratefully, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you all so much." Prophet, a grizzled veteran of both combat and the club, approached the three thieves with a business card. "Boys," Prophet said, "you see this address? That's the cancer treatment center at Phoenix General. Starting tomorrow, you're going to volunteer there every day for the next year. You're going to help patients, support families, and learn about what real courage looks like. And this," Savage added, pulling out his wallet and handing Tyler $500, "is for any medical expenses Mrs. Sullivan might incur because of the stress you caused her, plus a donation to the cancer center. But most importantly," Bear continued, "you're going to learn that there are consequences for preying on the innocent. Mrs. Sullivan is under our protection now. If we ever hear about any of you bothering sick people again, we'll have this conversation again. And next time, it won't be in a public place." The message was crystal clear. The three young men nodded frantically, understanding that they had been given a chance at redemption that they were unlikely to get again. Just then, a semi-truck with an attached trailer roared into the parking lot, its air brakes hissing as it came to a stop. Frank Diesel Sullivan jumped down from the cab, still wearing his work clothes but with his club colors prominently displayed. Frank was not a large man physically, but there was something about him that commanded immediate respect. Maybe it was his 20 years in the club. Maybe it was the way his brothers parted to let him through. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes when he saw his wife surrounded by the men who had dropped everything to protect her. "Maggie," Frank said, pulling his wife into a gentle embrace. "Are you okay, baby?" "I'm okay now," Maggie said, melting into his arms. "Your brothers came for me." Frank looked over at Tyler, Marcus, and Kevin, his eyes cold as winter steel. "Which one of you thought it would be funny to steal medication from my dying wife?" Frank asked quietly. The three young men looked at each other, none of them willing to answer. "All of them," Savage answered for them. They worked together, called her natural selection, filmed it for social media. Frank nodded slowly, processing this information. "Boys," Frank said, his voice deadly calm, "you picked the wrong family to mess with. But you're lucky. My wife is a better person than I am. She believes in forgiveness. So you're going to get something you don't deserve. A second chance." He pulled out his own wallet and added another $1,000 to the money Savage had already given them. "This goes to cancer research," Frank said, "and every month for the next 5 years, you're going to make the same donation. Because maybe if you spend enough time thinking about the disease that might kill my wife, you'll develop something resembling human decency." Iron Horse approached with the pharmacy receipt that had been in Maggie's bag. The medication these boys stole cost $847, Iron Horse announced. "Mrs. Sullivan, consider that debt paid. The club is covering it." Maggie started to protest, but Savage held up his hand. "Mrs. Sullivan," Savage said, "Diesel has been our brother for 20 years. Has been there for every one of us when we needed him. Now we get to be there for him. This is what family does." As the bikers began to filter out of the parking lot, each one stopped to check on Maggie and offer their support. Some shared stories about their own family members who had fought cancer. Others offered practical help like rides to treatment or assistance with medical bills. The three thieves were escorted to their car by several club members, their humiliation complete and their lesson learned. They drove away slowly, the sound of 40 motorcycles behind them, serving as a final reminder of the consequences of their actions. Tyler, Marcus, and Kevin did indeed show up at the cancer center the next day, where they began their year of volunteer service. The experience changed them fundamentally, teaching them lessons about courage, strength, and compassion that their previous lives had failed to provide. More importantly, they learned that the people they had seen as easy targets were actually warriors fighting battles they couldn't imagine, and that real strength came from supporting those fights, not profiting from them. Maggie continued her cancer treatment with the support of an entire motorcycle club behind her. Members would rotate taking her to appointments when Frank was on the road, and the club organized fundraising events that helped cover her medical expenses. 6 months later, when Maggie received the news that her cancer was in remission, the celebration at the clubhouse was one of the biggest parties in the chapter's history. Frank never forgot the night his brothers dropped everything to protect his wife. It reinforced his belief that the club was more than just an organization. It was a family bound by loyalty, honor, and the unbreakable code that family comes first. Because in the world of those who live by the Brotherhood code, attacking someone's family is attacking the entire club. Stealing from the sick is unforgivable, and justice sometimes fills an entire parking lot with motorcycles, ready to defend those who are fighting for their lives. The lesson was powerful and clear. Real courage is fighting cancer, real strength is supporting that fight, and sometimes, when you're facing your darkest moment, help arrives with the roar of 40 engines and the hearts of men who understand. Some things are worth fighting for.